And we're back. I'm Professor Scott Plum with the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
Well, good morning, Scott, and good morning, everyone. I got an appointment with the right person. The meeting went great as I asked penetrating and essential questions. My proposal was spot on, and the client seemed really interested in our value proposition. But here it is, 3 weeks later, and I still don't have the deal. What's up with that? In this podcast, Scott and I will have a conversation with Steve Keating, a well-respected sales professional and trainer, on the topic of, I'm doing the work, why don't I get the deal? All that and more on episode 420 of the Get in the Door podcast.
All right, in our book club today on the Challenger Sale, we're going to cover Chapter 3, Exporting Model to the Core. And this covers really three areas, Bill, I noticed. That it covers teach, tailor, and take control. All equal the constructive tension, and this is a diagram on page 33. And it's really built, I think, on a similar model that I've read with other books on customize the relationship and creating an experience that we have with people. What did you think of the chapter?
Well, I thought the first couple of pages were an advertisement for their company and how wonderful they were at their teaching process.
Okay.
Which, hey,
You've been granted the gift of discernment. That's what it is.
Deal,
it's,
right?
It's not being judgmental. It's being discerning.
Yeah. Well, I like that they talked about teach, tailor, and take control. And again, I don't think any one of these individually is a new concept. I know with our guest today, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit, Steve and I wrote a program together for his company called Resource Selling, which was all about bringing value to the customer, which included teaching them new ideas that you don't have an appointment if you don't have a reason for that appointment. So teaching is part of it. Tailoring, I know that we teach, you got to look at who you're talking to and what their values are and what's important to them. And I think that's really crucial, and that's a big part of the sale. But they do mention in the book that the take control is the more challenging aspect, and that can really go wrong if you're not doing it right. So, and I do think a lot of salespeople sit back and let the customer control or the prospect control the conversation, and they don't push for what they need, and they're willing to just be will-o'-the-wisp, and that's why they lose it on price.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this on the last episode, is we need to take the context of the chapter and the context of the book into the context of the sales process. And if we don't build trust, rapport, and respect and earn their respect in the first part of the sales process, it's going to be very difficult for us to take control. It's going to be very difficult for us to be appeared as the resource, as the person that has information that is valuable to them. And it's up to us as salespeople to be able to throttle that information so that we teach, not to educate, but teach to influence. And when we follow that philosophy, we're really working on persuading somebody to see something differently. And when we work on changing the state and the imagination and the vision and the perceived value, because everything's perceived, we have an impact on making a change in them, and we need to challenge them in making a change. If we don't challenge them, we don't change them, but we can't challenge them unless we have respect. And one of the biggest challenges I think that salespeople have is a high need for approval. So they want to work to be liked, and you can't work to be liked and then take control, because then you come across as being overly assertive. You don't know your boundaries, and then you could be perceived as being disrespectful.
Yeah, if you're only liked for personality's sake, I think that's true. But if you're liked and respected because you've taught them something new and you've tailored your conversation to their needs, then that respect that you're talking about is built. So I do think they're taking these in the right order.
And that's the relationship builder. And that's what they, being liked as the relationship builder. Hey, I'm building a relationship. Hey, I want to be a resource. I want to be a friend in the business. But they don't have respect for you, because you don't challenge them. And if you don't challenge them, then it almost appears as though you don't have confidence in your product or solution. And you're expecting them to come up with the initiation to inquire, when you create enough questions through the challenger sale process for them to scratch their head going, there's just got to be a better way. Maybe there is. Maybe I should learn something now.
Well, too many salespeople are hoping that the customer will take them to the next step in the sales process, whatever that next step is, rather than pushing for what they need to move the sale forward. So they sit around and wait for them to ask questions. They wait for them to respond to the proposal. They wait for them to close themselves. So they're doing a lot of waiting and not doing a lot of taking control.
Yeah, and it seems like the chapter concentrated on taking control in really two areas. One is about price and money is one area. So really working on identifying the costs and consequences of an action. And then the other side is the decision-making momentum, and to be able to understand, how do you go about making decisions around here? How have you made decisions like this in the past? Who else besides you is involved in making the decisions to proceed? And really getting the decision-making process, and then really focusing on the value and focus on value over price. And that's what I think a lot of salespeople struggle with, because they just get so concentrated on the solution, and they try to make a solution stick to something that hasn't been created as a problem. And then they end up putting a price on it, and the prospects don't see the value, right, because there's not enough contrast between cost, consequences versus price to create value.
So the full part of the book is going to be how to teach better, how to tailor your product or your conversation, and how to take control through constructive tension. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I did like at the end of the chapter that they talked about that this is going to be a difficult process. I do think, and you and I, Scott, have both trained for a long time, I do think everyone wants to be microwaved. They want a 3-day course or a course done over a period of time, and then they never go back to it again. The managers don't do anything to make it come alive. And a lot of training is wasted if the organization as a whole isn't going to make a decision to do things differently.
It's almost like we need to train the leadership on how to do a post-seminar training model reinforcement. And that's what I've started to incorporate is, here's the pre-work, here's the work, the classes, the workshops, etc. And then here's the post-reinforcement program. And then I need to check in with leadership on, how's it going? How are you reinforcing it? Tell me about what you're measuring, because we identified what to measure, because you can't manage what you don't measure. And then we start talking about the measurements, and then the management is kind of going loosey-goosey. They're not reinforcing it, and they're just kind of letting people get back to the way they were before I started. It's amazing. I worked with companies, they've had the best month in the history of the company while I'm working with them over a 2 or 3 month period. And then 6 months later, they've dropped down to where they were. And what changed? You can't tell me the market changed.
We went back to our old habits.
Yeah, we should have had enough momentum to create enough energy to be able to overcome any type of impact the market would have had in most cases, to continue the momentum and the growth of the company.
Yeah, well, good. Well, I'm looking forward to chapter 4, where they're going to start talking about teaching. I think they've got the next 2 chapters on teaching and bringing value outside of just your product or service. So I'm looking forward to the next section.
This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by the hosts of Get in the Door podcast. Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future.
We're excited to have on our podcast today a lifelong friend of mine, Steve Keating. He and I had the chance to work together about 30 years ago with the Dale Carnegie program on how to train people. He went on to work as the Senior Manager of Sales and Leadership at the Toro Company, but he also produces his own blog called Lead Today, which has over 1 million subscribers. And we're going to link to that, but it's at stevekeating.me, and we'll link to that. But welcome, Steve, to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill. Good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your sales career. I went into just very briefly, but where have you been in sales, and what do you think is important?
Well, I got into sales really the way many people do, kind of through no fault of my own. I actually have an engineering degree, and early in my engineering career, we were developing a pretty complicated product that the salespeople had a hard time describing. And so they started sending me on sales calls with the sales representative to actually talk about the technicalities of the product.
You were the technical sales guy.
I was before there was such a thing, and didn't take long for the company to figure out that it was cheaper to send one guy out and they could teach me how to sell, because there really wasn't much to learn. Much faster.
It's pretty easy. Anyone can do it.
Absolutely. And they could do that much faster.
Were you a good talker? Because good sales guys are good talkers.
That's what they told me. And so I wanted nothing to do with sales, but I started going on these calls alone and suddenly found myself in sales. And I didn't like that a whole lot. And so I left there and went to work for another company, now working on the product I'd been developing. And after just a few months of doing that, they said, the stuff doesn't really break very much, so we don't really need you here working on this stuff. But we do have a position in sales if you're interested. And it's like, I guess I'm just doomed to go to the dark side. So into sales I went, and the more I did it, and the more I built relationships and actual friendships with my customers, the more I enjoyed it and the more I succeeded. And that really led me to where I am today. I took a Dale Carnegie course to become more professional in my selling. Ended up, as you remember, Bill, about week 8 or 9 of that 12-week class, going to work full-time for Dale Carnegie, selling and teaching. And it really became just a way of life for me. And I have never, even though I've been training for a couple of decades, almost 3 decades, I've never stopped selling, as I believe the best sales trainers are still actively involved in the profession of selling.
So it got under your skin a little bit.
It did. It did.
So you wanted to talk about this topic of I'm doing the work, why don't I get the deal? What does that mean?
Well, it's interesting, and it hasn't really changed in the entire time I've been in the profession of selling. Is the vast majority of salespeople do most everything at least okay throughout the sales process and still don't get the sale, and they are stumped by why that is. But the reality of it is they don't get the business because they don't ask for it.
Okay.
They do many other things, but they never take that final step of officially asking for the business.
So do you profess getting a whole bunch of closes, kind of the Tom Hopkins deal, right? They always be closing and let's have all these special closing techniques, or what does the close mean to you?
So, it's funny. I took a Tom Hopkins class, and I was very familiar with ABC, and I still remember some of the closes that he taught, the hat in the hand close, where you as the call is concluding and the customer is kind of hemming and hawing, you pick up your hat. That's how long ago it was, and you walk towards the door.
Now you're getting a hat.
And you say to the customer, I need to apologize, because if I'd done my job, you'd be now on your way to experiencing the wonderful benefits that my product and service had to offer. If only I'd done my job. And the whole idea was to get the customer to say, whoa, wait a minute, maybe I should. And they were all canned, memorized closes.
Right.
And
that sounds like Columbo to me.
Yeah, really.
That's the old Columbo show. Yep.
Oh yeah, yep.
Just one more thing.
Yes. One more thing. And the thing of it is, today, I do not even like the term close, because it has such a negative connotation to it. Like, this deal is done. I'm done with this guy. Time to move on to my next target. And
you want to buy or don't you?
Yeah. And the fact is that as professional salespeople, we need to keep in mind that when that customer says yes, to them, the relationship is just beginning. It's not closed. It's not done, not over. And I know it's just kind of mindset, but the mindset can make a huge difference. And so I try to coach people to earn the buying commitment. not close the deal. And I slip into the same vernacular too and talk about closing. But what I really want people to do is to realize that when they've earned that business and gotten a yes from the customer, now it's time for them to prove everything they've said during the sales process is going to actually happen.
If I could jump in here, I think I like the word commencement. It kind of describes the step in the process, like a college commencement. You graduate from the sales process. Now you're ending up earning a customer from a prospect.
Indeed.
If I could comment on one thing you said earlier, Steve, I think some of our listeners would say that they do ask for the sale or they do ask for the close. Mm-hmm. How have you noticed that salespeople are asking for the close, but not really asking for the close or asking for the commitment? How do salespeople, what do they sound like when they're hemming and hawing and they're not getting to that assertive question of asking for the commitment?
So that's a great question, Scott. One of my times at Dale Carnegie, and I love Dale Carnegie, but one of the things I wasn't real fond of is Carnegie people love to role play. And I remember coming back into the office, and my boss, Mark Norman, had Selling Power magazine or something on his desk, and it had a statistic that still largely holds true to this day, that over 90% of formal sales presentations end without the sales professional asking for the order. And so he shared that with me and said, well, do you always ask for the order? And I said, oh, I absolutely always ask for the order. And he says, well, that's great. Let's role play that right now. And it's like, what? In the hallway? And he goes, yeah, give me your best order asking question. And I said, okay. So I thought a minute and I said, so what do you think? and he says, I think you should ask an order asking question. And I thought, oh boy, that was my strongest one. Let me.
What do you think, close?
So then I said, okay. So then I said, you'll let me know. And he says, yep, I'll let you know as soon as you ask an order asking question.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, those were my power closes there. and I realized almost immediately that, that's not an order asking question. An order asking question gets you a yes or a no that indicates directionally where that customer is going. Mm-hmm. And I didn't ask for the order. I think for the reason, frankly, most salespeople don't ask. I don't want to risk the no.
Yeah, so true.
And so I make it easy on the customer to just ignore me or put me off. And I'm so proud of this relationship that I've built with the customer. But is it really a relationship if you can't ask for the order? Really? Yeah. I don't think that it is. And people who go out and do most everything right in a sales process, except ask for the order, to me, I would classify them more as professional visitors than professional salespeople.
Yeah, so true. That's the relationship builder, model out of the book, The Challenger Sale. And I notice that salespeople just don't like rejection. They don't like to ask questions that would, risk the relationship. They don't want to hear a no. And they like to keep somebody in their pipeline because there may be a chance, like the movie Dumb and Dumber. There's not a 1 in a million chance that I go out with you. You mean I've got a chance?
Yep.
and they keep the prospect in the pipeline and they clog up the pipeline. They're not talking to more new, better people.
And I had the biggest pipeline in the world back at Carnegie. Now, some of the prospects were dead, but they still hadn't said no.
They voted. No. And they voted,
right.
too.
Yeah. Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think I have a thing I call it, the deal is dead. You just haven't had the funeral yet.
Yeah.
But realistically, though, Steve, if the deal is right and everything is good, won't the customer just go ahead and buy anyway?
Well, they might. They might. They very well could. Oftentimes they do. But here's my question back to you, Bill. Might you want a paycheck? Might you want to earn a living? Because the customer might, but I don't want to take that chance as a sales professional. They might take the chance and say yes, but I need to help them say yes. And I'll give you an example. We're going to get into the fall here. It's going to start to get cool at night. And we're going to run out to a Penny's or a Kohl's, and we're going to be looking for a winter jacket, and you see one on the rack and you try it on, it fits good, you look in the mirror, it looks good, and you're thinking, should I buy this? Should I buy it? I don't know. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And so you put it back on the rack and you're walking out of the store, you get to the car and it's like, I should have bought that jacket. I like that jacket. I don't know what's holding me back. And all it would have taken for you to buy that jacket was some salesperson, some clerk walk up and say, would you like that jacket? And you would have said yes. But because no one asked, you just didn't pull the trigger on it. And that happens on our sales calls as well.
And so the salesperson that won't ask the question is no better than a retail clerk.
That's basically true. I mean, what are you doing?
Who puts the product on the rack and hopes you buy it?
You know, we're really not out there trying to make things available for purchase. We're trying to sell. And if we have this relationship, it's a business level relationship, and there's an obligation on both sides of this relationship. And if I've done my job and proven to you and showed you how my product or service is going to be a benefit of you, then I've earned the right to ask for the order. You can say yes or no, but I've still earned the right to ask.
So we do have people that hesitate. You talked about the maybes or the, I want to wait. What does a good buying question do to the mind of the buyer? What is a good, whatever that is, you want to buy it now, or how does that affect them?
So I believe psychologically that tells them it's time to make a decision. It's funny. There are a good percentage of people in the world who claim to work better under pressure. Now, they actually don't, but until they have to do something, they don't do it. And if we don't ask an order asking question, there's really no need for a customer to make a decision. And one of the things that I learned back in my Carnegie days to tell a customer that would hem and haw would be to say, Bill, you have never been closer to improving your sales career than you are right now. All it's going to take is a yes. Are you ready? and that's a fact. Your customer is never going to be closer to a yes answer than immediately after you've influenced them to see the benefits of your product and service. You call back in a week or two later, and they have moved a week or two further away from being ready to say that yes.
So they're really primed up at that point. And if you don't ask something at that point, it starts to fade away. That desire can start to fade away, that commitment.
It just does.
Yeah.
And they almost begin to get buyer's remorse without ever actually buying.
Is there ever a wrong time then to ask? I mean, we talked about the always be closing. Is there a too soon? Like when you just walked in the door?
Yeah. Hi, Bill. My name is Steve Keating. May I have your business? That might be a little bit too soon. Scott, I believe in earning the right to ask for the order. Mm-hmm. And until we've done that by demonstrating to our customer that we truly understand what their needs and wants are, what their goals and objectives are, and have truly made a connection between their wants and needs and our product and service. When we've done that, then I believe we've earned the right to ask for the business, and not before.
Yeah, I totally agree. So it sounds like you're saying that the close is the most important part of the sales process.
Nope.
What is the most important part of the sales process, or what has the greatest influence or impact on increasing your chances of closing a sale?
So here's what I hate about some salespeople. When they call you up and they say, I got just what you need.
Yeah.
And they don't even get my name right. Right. It's like, Stefan, I know just what you need. And it's like, really? So whatever you want to call it, I believe, I call it the discovery step, the information gathering step. If we don't really know what that customer needs and what they're trying to accomplish, then I don't know if what I've got really is going to help them. And if I don't know what I have is really going to help them, I shouldn't. As a long-term strategic thinking sales professional, I should not be trying to sell them something I don't know will help them. Mm-hmm. And so to me, every part of the sales process is important, but I think a lot of, especially long-term salespeople, really gloss over the discovery part of it. And they go in there with a mindset that I'm going to try to sell them this because I've got a spiff on this. We've got too much in inventory. The sales manager is bugging me to get these things off our floor.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't ask the questions to really understand how or if our product or service can help the customer. So I default to discovery almost all the time when asked that question.
I like what you say about every step being important, because that's why it's a process.
Yep.
Right. So the discovery step is the most important until you've discovered what you needed to know. And then the next step becomes the most important step. And then eventually the closing becomes the most important step, because if you don't do one, the process breaks down.
Well, I tell salespeople, and some of them get frustrated with me for saying this, but there's really two ways to sell as I see it. You can sell by process or you can sell by accident. And if you can't tell me specifically why the customer bought and specifically why the last customer might not have bought and where you are in that sales process, then I am tempted to say you're selling by accident, and you're most likely, by the way, selling on price.
Right. So true. It's really great having you on during this book study on the Challenger sale, Steve. And just to put things into context with the Challenger sale and what you're talking about when it comes to the discovery questions, in that process, prospects could become upset. Salespeople may be peppering them with questions. Prospects start to get defensive. They start getting short answers. And how do we, as a salesperson, know that we can see the application of a solution, but the prospect's getting defensive? How do we handle that, or what do we do when we really need to challenge the prospect? We know the discovery step is the most important step of the whole sales process. How do we continue with maintaining that respect and not irritating the prospect so they end up saying no just because they don't like us, but they really need what we have?
Yep. So that happens. And here's the thought. First of all, I would say that we need to listen with a whole lot more than just our ears. We can pick up all kinds of verbal signals that we're maybe getting ourselves out on the thin ice with too many questions. And so obviously my first recommendation is, before we ask any questions, that we ask permission to ask questions. And we tell that customer what we're going to do with the information that we get from these questions. And then if I'm picking up any nonverbal cues that this customer is beginning to lose interest in my fantastic questioning strategy, I'll stop asking questions and I will begin to talk about my product a little bit and begin to intermix some of the advantages that I think will be a benefit based on my earlier questions, and then move back into some additional questions. You know, one of the problems about teaching the sales process, as you guys well know, is that in the classroom, it looks really pretty clean. You know, we build relationships, we ask some questions, we show our product, we support the decision, and it looks really neat like that. But in real life, it's really kind of jumbled up. And so we never stop building trust. We never stop building the relationship. Frankly, we never stop asking questions. We never stop advocating for our product or solution. And so I'm perfectly fine with intermingling some extra questions while I'm talking about the product as well. Whatever I need to do to make that customer comfortable, I will do that. Now, I feel a little concerned that if I'm talking too much, I've lost control of that sales process. And so I need to kind of balance that. And the ability to do that comes with experience as much as anything. But there is certainly a danger of making a customer feel as though they're being interrogated and not supported if we're not careful.
Yeah, that interrogation was the word that was coming to mind for me when they get uncomfortable.
Yeah. Earlier, Steve, you mentioned that when you have an easy sale, the prospect most likely bought on price. How do you work with a prospect that buys on price and you want to present value?
Well, that's a great question, because I've of late been on a value kick with the people I'm working with. And first of all, there are far, far fewer people who purchase on price than we think there are. And so I will ask a customer, frankly, so, you know, just so we understand where we're going directionally and what areas you want to focus on, would you describe yourself for me as somebody who is more interested in purchasing on value or price? And if they tell me price, that's fine. That's great. I'll say, well, tell me, what kind of car is it
Yeah.
that you purchased?
Exactly.
And I asked that question to a guy in Seattle a number of years ago, and he said, well, I drive a BMW. And it's like, and you're a price buyer. And he goes, absolutely. And I said, so why did you buy a BMW? Because there has to be like 10,000 cars that would be cheaper than that.
Exactly.
And he goes, well, it was the best value. And it's like, okay, great. Well, I just wanted to be clear on that. So you actually are a value purchaser. So if we can discuss value and you see the value in doing business with me and perhaps investing more to do so, you'd be willing to do that. Yep. And so I need to help that customer, first of all, point out that there have undoubtedly been many occasions in their buying experience where they have not bought on price. And so when I open them up to that, they become much more receptive to value. But I coach salespeople to think about value from that first, hi, Scott, my name is Steve. And everything you say and do from that point on should be a value add to that customer. And don't just think about value in terms of what your product or your organization brings to this deal. What value do you as a sales professional, what experience, what expertise do you bring into this value proposition for that customer, and sell the whole thing?
Right.
So as we wrap this up, and now you're talking about value, why don't we connect that to the questions that we ask as we're trying to finish the project or get them to make a commitment? Let's kind of wrap this all together.
Well, it's interesting, Bill. I don't want to place the value on my product or service for that customer. So I will ask questions around some variation of, what is it worth to you if, and what would that be worth to you? And if that problem were eliminated, what's that worth to you? And get them literally to try to put at least some emotional value on it, if not an outright dollar figure on it, so that they're telling me what the value is instead of me telling them what the value is. Because I'll tell you one thing, as good as I think I am, the customer believes themselves about 1,000 times faster than they're going to believe me. So if they tell themselves what the value is, it's a fact, period, done deal.
And then once they've established that, then it's easy to ask the questions to close it up.
I think it is, because my closing would at that point be somewhere along the lines of, well, Bill and Scott, it's obvious to me, I believe it's obvious to you based on what you said, that this is going to accomplish exactly what you wanted. You see the value in the decision. And so it appears, and correct me if I'm wrong, the decision is clearly yes, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. Excellent. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We can always tell when we're talking with someone who spent a lot of time out there actually selling rather than theoretically going through the courses. And there's enough trainers out there that haven't actually sold anything. So thank you so much for your input. Any resources that you want us to guide people to?
No, you guys can find me online. I'm pretty easy to find if you just Google Steve Keating. But you can find me at my blog at stevekeating.me. And there's a link there actually to my Twitter feed as well. And it's a pretty active blog. I post 2 new posts each week. And it's a mix between leadership and sales. But you can easily contact me right through the blog as well.
Great. We'll include that on the show notes. We'll also include your Twitter handle so people can click on that and follow you right away.
Great.
All right, Steve. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. That was really great.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. And I use that term in the broadest sense of the word.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Great having you with us.
You bet.
This segment of the Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by Steve Kloida's book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
Today's golden nugget and close is on a quote by Henry Ford. You can't build a reputation on what you're going to do.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the world today is full of good intentions. Everyone's wearing a ribbon but not doing any work.
Oh, boy, ain't that true.
And good intentions don't mean a thing in the real world. You've got to finish the job.
Right. And the ribbons mean different things to different people, too.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's confusing.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that actors like to wear ribbons but not give any money to, they give their voice to something, but they don't.
Right.
So do something out there. Go out there and whatever your job is, get it done.
Yeah.
Right? Build a reputation by getting things done. So
this was a great show. We're going to have all the resources available at the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. You can connect with Steve. You can follow him. I really learned a lot about his approach, Bill. I'm really grateful that you invited him to join us, and I look forward to having him back.
Excellent. Yeah, I thought he did a really good job. Next week, we'll do Chapter 4 of the Challenger Sale, Teaching for Differentiation, Part 1, Why Insight Matters. And our topic is Follow Through and Foul Up. I wonder what that means. Excellent. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.